If you are taking gabapentin for nerve pain, your feet might feel a little better today, but you are slowly losing your memory, gaining weight, and your actual nerves are still dying. What if I told you those pills only drug your brain, not heal your feet? Today, we are exposing. This video is for educational purposes only. Peripheral neuropathy is a serious condition that can lead to severe infections and amputation. Never stop taking your prescribed medications like gabapentin cold turkey, as it can cause severe withdrawal seizures and pain rebounds. Always work with your doctor or endocrinologist when changing your diet or supplement routine. If you have open sores on your feet, seek immediate medical attention. The safety warning matters because gabapentin and pregabalin labels both warn against abrupt discontinuation, and they list nervous system side effects such as dizziness, somnolence, fatigue, and concentration problems, along with weight gain and swelling in many patients. Now, if you are living this right now, I want to say something clearly. You are not weak, and you are not imagining it. That heavy, exhausted, foggy feeling is real. The weight gain is real. The mental slowness is real. The reason you keep thinking, "Why do I feel a little less pain but a lot more broken?" is because these drugs can quiet symptoms while also creating central side effects that make life feel smaller, slower, and heavier. And for people on pregabalin, the official labeling even calls out abnormal thinking, especially problems with concentration and attention. For gabapentin, the label lists dizziness, sleepiness, fatigue, swelling, and increased weight among the common adverse reactions. And that is why so many people feel trapped. The doctor gives them a prescription because the pain is unbearable, and for a moment the edge comes off. But the numbness does not stop climbing. The burning does not always disappear. The feet still feel strange. The balance still feels off. The real issue is that peripheral neuropathy is not just a pain problem. It is a nerve health problem. And when the cause underneath it is corrected, nerves can sometimes recover and regrow. That means the goal is not just to mute the message. The goal is to help the nerve live again. So here is the hard truth that most people are never told. A medication that quiets pain signals is not the same thing as a treatment that repairs the nerve. That difference matters. Because if you only chase pain suppression, you can spend months, even years, feeling dulled, foggy, and frustrated while the underlying neuropathy keeps demanding attention. In the next chapter, I am going to show you exactly why this feels like a trap, what gabapentin is actually doing in the nervous system, and why so many patients end up paying for short-term relief with long-term confusion. Gabapentin is used clinically for neuropathic pain and seizures, and its recognized effect is to reduce neuronal excitability. Its labels do not describe it as a nerve repair therapy. Here is the trap. Gabapentin is not a nerve repair drug. The FDA label describes its analgesic mechanism as unknown, and it does not present it as a medicine that rebuilds damaged peripheral nerves. What it does do is change how pain is processed in the nervous system, which is why people can feel less pain without the underlying nerve injury actually being fixed. That is why this drug can create such a dangerous illusion. You feel a little less on fire, so it seems like the problem is getting better. But symptom relief is not the same thing as tissue repair. The source of the neuropathy is still there, and the FDA labeling for gabapentin and pregabalin shows exactly the kinds of side effects patients complain about most: dizziness, sleepiness, fatigue, balance problems, slowed thinking, temporary memory problems, and edema or weight gain. Pregabalin, which lives in the same neuropathy conversation as gabapentin, is officially described by the FDA as binding to the alpha-2 delta site in the central nervous system. In animal models, That binding reduces calcium-dependent release of pain-signaling neurotransmitters in the spinal cord. Translation: this family of drugs can turn down the volume on pain transmission, but that is not the same thing as rebuilding the peripheral nerve in your feet. And this is where people start to feel betrayed. The medicine may slightly reduce the pain signal, but it can also leave them foggy, heavy, sleepy, and less sharp. Gabapentin's own patient labeling warns that it can slow thinking and motor skills, and lists common side effects such as dizziness, difficulty with coordination, temporary loss of memory, and feeling tired. Pregabalin's labeling similarly reports abnormal thinking, somnolence, increased appetite, and weight gain. That is why many people do not feel healed. They feel medicated. So let me put this in the clearest possible terms. Gabapentin can quiet the fire alarm. It can reduce the volume of the emergency signal. But if the actual nerve tissue is still starved, inflamed, and damaged, the house is still burning. That is why the next step is not asking, "How do I numb this harder?" The next step is asking, "What environment does a peripheral nerve need in order to survive, stabilize, and possibly regenerate?" That is the question most people never get answered. And it is the question that changes everything. Now we get to one of the most damaging phrases in medicine. Your nerves are dead. People hear that and immediately think there is no hope left. But that statement is too blunt, too incomplete, and in many cases, simply false when we are talking about the peripheral nervous system. The central nervous system and peripheral nervous system do not behave the same way. In the peripheral nervous system, regeneration is far more robust, in part because Schwann cells actively support axonal regrowth. Peripheral neuropathy usually shows up first in the longest nerves, which is why the feet are so often the first place people feel numbness, burning, tingling, or that strange, walking on socks sensation. Nines notes that most neuropathies are length-dependent, meaning the farthest nerve endings from the brain, especially in the feet, are where symptoms often begin. The symptoms can then move upward over time. So when someone says, "My nerve is dead," what they often really mean is this: the nerve is injured, stressed, deprived, and unable to keep up. Peripheral nerves do not live in a vacuum. They depend on a microenvironment built from blood supply, supportive Schwann cells, intact axonal transport, and a chemistry that is not constantly inflamed or toxic. The old neurochemistry literature explains that long PNS axons are especially vulnerable to ischemia, trauma, and other noxious influences, and that injury can trigger Wallerian degeneration with Schwann cell proliferation that helps guide regeneration. Here is the part most people never hear. Regeneration is possible, but it is not automatic. If the environment stays hostile, the nerve cannot fully rebuild. The same source notes that repeated cycles of demyelination and remyelination can make full restoration of normal peripheral nerve anatomy impossible. In plain English, a nerve can have the capacity to heal, but if the terrain keeps crushing it, starving it, or inflaming it, repair stalls. So the myth is not that nerves are fragile. The myth is that they are hopeless. Peripheral nerves are living tissue with a repair system, but that system needs the right conditions. That is why the real question is never just, "How do I stop the pain tonight?" The real question is, "How do I change the environment so the nerve has a chance to survive, remyelinate, and function again?" That shift in thinking is where real progress begins. And in the next chapter, we will talk about what that environment actually needs. For context, neuropathy from conditions like diabetes often starts in the feet and can be progressive, which is why protecting the longest nerves early matters. Now we get to the part that actually changes the game. If neuropathy is partly a microenvironment problem, then the goal is not just to silence the signal, it is to support the terrain the nerve lives in. For diabetic neuropathy, the National Institute of Diabetes and Digestive and Kidney Diseases says the key to keeping nerve damage from getting worse is managing blood glucose, blood pressure, cholesterol, and weight, plus staying physically active and not smoking. That is the foundation. Everything else sits on top of it. This is where alpha-lipoic acid, or ALA, enters the conversation. ALA has been studied for diabetic neuropathy, and the National Center for Complementary and Integrative Health says the evidence is mixed. Some reviews found symptom improvement, others did not, and the overall findings are inconsistent. At the same time, safety data have generally been reassuring, with common side effects like headache, heartburn, nausea, and vomiting. In other words, ALA is not magic, but it is one of the more biologically plausible tools people discuss when they are trying to support nerve function. Benfotiamine is another ingredient people talk about because it is a fat-soluble form of vitamin B1 and has been studied in diabetic polyneuropathy. Early trials suggested it may extend treatment options and improve symptoms in some patients, but longer-term data have been mixed, and a recent 12-month placebo-controlled study reported no significant effects on multiple morphometric, neurophysiological, and clinical measures, even though it was well tolerated. That means benfotiamine should be viewed as a possible adjunct, not a cure. So when people talk about a premium nerve support protocol, the most defensible way to think about it is this: a structured adjunct meant to support the biology that nerves depend on, not a replacement for medical care, not a substitute for glucose control, and not a reason to ignore worsening numbness or balance loss. A thoughtful plan may include ALA, a B vitamin strategy such as benfotiamine, and a physician-guided diabetes or neuropathy plan that keeps the underlying disease under control. That approach lines up with what NIDDK emphasizes: blood sugar, blood pressure, cholesterol, weight, movement, and foot protection. And I want to say this very clearly: do not stop your gabapentin cold turkey. The FDA labeling warns that anti-epileptic drugs should not be abruptly discontinued because seizure frequency can increase, and withdrawal symptoms have been reported after discontinuation. This is about building a foundation under your feet, figuratively and literally, while staying safe with your prescribing clinician. That is how you move from survival mode to repair mode. So here is the final truth. You do not have to accept a life where the only options are unbearable nerve pain or living in a medicated fog. That is not a real choice. It is a false trade-off. Peripheral neuropathy is serious, and the feet are often where it shows up first, which is why this condition deserves respect, daily attention, and a plan that is bigger than symptom suppression alone. The most important thing you can do is stop thinking only in terms of pain control and start thinking in terms of nerve environment. For people with diabetic neuropathy, NIDDK emphasizes controlling blood glucose, blood pressure, cholesterol, and weight to help keep nerve damage from getting worse, along with daily foot care and prompt attention to foot problems. That is not glamorous, but it is foundational. It is how you protect what you still have while giving the nerve the best chance to stabilize. If you choose to use a premium nerve support protocol, think of it as an adjunct to a serious medical plan, not a replacement for one. The most defensible approach is to support the biology, reduce oxidative stress, and keep the underlying disease under control while working with a clinician. Alpha-lipoic acid has mixed evidence in diabetic neuropathy, but NCCIH notes it has been studied for symptom relief and appears generally safe in the studies it reviewed. That is why it remains part of the conversation, not because it is magic, but because the biology makes sense and the data are at least worth discussing. You do not need to keep paying the price of brain fog, fatigue, and weight gain just to quiet a signal. You deserve a plan that respects your brain, respects your body, and respects the fact that peripheral nerves can sometimes heal better when the environment improves. The goal is not just to survive the week. The goal is to reclaim your feet, your focus, and your future. Check the link in the description for the premium nerve regeneration blueprint. And one final reminder. This video is for education only, not personal medical advice. Do not stop Gabapentin or Pregabalin suddenly. The FDA labeling warns that abrupt discontinuation can increase seizure risk, and patients should taper only under medical guidance. If your numbness, balance, or foot symptoms are worsening, or if you have any new foot problem, contact your clinician promptly.